two young boys take turns swinging an axe to fulfill their sacred task, an assigned vocation to cut down the gigas cedar, hindering their village's growth. But it's futile, barely making a dent, like the 6 generations that preceded them. The helplessness quickly fades as Alice, their friend, shows up with lunch, greeting both Yujio, the blonde, and a strangely familiar dark-haired boy named Kirito. Their lunch will spoil if they aren't fast enough. If only there was a way to preserve food. Kirito has a brain blast, coming up with an ingenious way to preserve Alice's pie by making it cold, and probably uncomfortably moist using his knowledge of cold salted meat. They just need some ice, which should be no problem in a feudal kingdom lacking the technology to cut down a single tree. They remember a legendary hero who found himself in an ice cave while chasing the dragon guarding the border to the Dark Territories. As long as they don't cross the border, they can avoid breaking the rules detailed in the Taboo Index. Upon reaching the cave, they find enough ice to last the village a lifetime. But something's off. They find the blue rose sword and bones of the ice dragon surrounding a hoard of treasure. There was nothing in the legend about the dragon's death. After gathering as much ice as they can carry, they realize there are multiple paths. Having forgotten which one they came in through, they choose one that leads to the Dark Territory. They hear the sound of battle and spot an Integrity Knight fighting a knight from the Dark Territory while riding dragons. The Integrity Knight cuts down the Dark Territory Knight and he drops out of the sky, landing a few meters from the children, reaching out as if asking for help.
Feeling static? Your IP doesn't need to be. Never feel insecure again with the comforting embrace of NordVPN, a service that offers the same security as your favorite Dakimakura. No one will even know you ordered one. Or 20. Connect to one of over 5,500 servers located in 59 countries with a single click. If your hands are occupied, try out the Auto Connect feature and keep your internet activity away from the prying eyes of your waifu. Unfortunately, most independent nations with a population of 1 are region locked, so if you want to watch Crunchyroll instead of eating some, NordVPN is your best bet. It's like an isekai for your IP address. Speaking of alternate worlds, NordLocker is perfect for storing and accessing your encrypted files, so you can work on your spreadsheets after waking up in an RPG. Need extra protection? NordPass not only manages passwords, it also generates passwords strong enough to withstand more than one punch. Choose from 3 different plans. Enjoy the anonymity and security of NordVPN with the standard plan. If you're not worried about anyone discovering all the harem anime in your viewing history, the Plus plan includes NordLocker for added peace of mind. Get both NordLocker and NordPass with the complete plan and keep your credentials confidential. Help out the channel and your wallet by going to nordvpn.com/panime and receive 4 free months when you sign up today. The first 30 days are risk-free, money-back guaranteed. Watch your favorite anime from the comfort of your basement without losing quality or speed using NordVPN's rock-solid security.
Alice feels she should and begins to move toward him before the 2 boys can stop her. She trips and her finger barely crosses the boundary. Suddenly, a head appears, confirming their fear. Alice has broken the Taboo Index. The Integrity Knight from the day before visits the village, but this time, the only thing he'll be vanquishing is a child. Kirito tries to create a distraction, but Yujio is unable to move. A searing pain in his right eye stops him in his tracks. Shortly after, Kirigaya Kazuto wakes up from a full dive. He meets up with Shino at a cafe, where she asks him to help her in the next BOB before Asuna arrives. Worried about his physical condition, Asuna checks an app that monitors his vitals, figuring his new part-time job was to blame. Shino inquires, and Kazuto explains that he's been working for a company called Wrath that's developing a new type of full dive tech. They call it a soul translator, which uses fluctlights, basically the equivalent of a soul instead of the user's brain, effectively coding short-term memories onto the fluctlight to create a more realistic sensory experience. Due to the nature of the project, Kazuto doesn't retain any memories from the virtual world codenamed Underworld. While walking home with Asuna, Kazuto floats the idea of going to America to research the next generation of full dive tech, only if she would join him, of course. The Soul Transfer project feels like an extension of Kayaba's work, and he would rather distance himself from similar endeavors. They're interrupted by a man who begins to ask for directions, when Kazuto confronts him about following them ever since they left the cafe. Dropping the act, the man reveals that he's a former member of Laughing Coffin and lunges toward Kazuto with a syringe, the same one that Death Gun used on his victims. It's showtime. Kazuto pushes Asuna to safety and tries to fend off their assailant. In the melee, he's injected with the toxin as his umbrella pierces the attacker's leg. But it's too late. Kazuto collapses from cardiac arrest. Kirito wakes up in the middle of a forest with no recollection of how he got there. Judging by the scenery and his clothing, he figures he must be back at the Underworld. But he shouldn't have any memory of the real world if that's the case. He stumbles across Yujiro, though he has no memory of him and can't tell if he's an NPC or not. He doesn't recognize any terms relating to video games, so gaining information isn't fruitful. He decides to wait until Yujiro finishes his sacred task for the day. He discovers that the game menu is still accessible. Yujiro details the incident with Alice, though in his telling, Kirito wasn't there. After explaining his calling, Yujiro was surprised when Kirito asks to help. Despite his sword skills and experience, the tree is just as resilient as always. Upon completion of Yujiro's daily duty, they head to the village. The boy guarding the gate stops them. He begins to make fun of Yujiro's calling and assumes Kirito can't remember his, as a lost child of Vecta, though he's quickly put in his place after Kirito claims to be a swordsman, using his sword to slice through a tree stump. Yujiro brings Kirito to the church, where he meets Selka. While falling asleep, he deduces Wrath must have taken the Fluctlights of babies. With the in-game acceleration of time, generations of artificial reproduction would culminate in realistic people, especially since Yujiro claims it's been 6 years since Alice disappeared, which only happened yesterday, IRL time. The next day, the two boys head to the Gigas tree. Kirito wonders about Selka, who, as it turns out, is Alice's younger sister. After Alice was taken, she took over at the church, learning the sacred arts, system commands perceived as magic. Since the axe is practically useless, Kirito asks if there's anything more powerful. A little while later, Yujiro returns with the blue rose sword he retrieved 3 years after the incident. Kirito tries to use it on the tree, but isn't able to do much, but it still beats the axe. If they can raise their object control authority, they should be able to handle the sword properly. That night, Kirito asks Selka about her sister's disappearance. Apparently, Yujiro hasn't been the same since. Before leaving, Selka asks why her sister was taken, since no one will tell her. When he wakes up, Selka is nowhere to be found. Yujiro immediately deduces she must have gone to the cave where Alice broke the taboo index. The two hurry after her. They hear screams from inside the cave and discover she's been abducted by goblins. Yujiro freezes up, unable to move as the goblins close in. Kirito calms him down and devises a plan to rescue Selka. Arming them with swords, he begins cutting the goblins down. While Yujiro watches Kirito fight the goblin leader, he still hesitates to act. Just when it looks like Kirito is about to lose, he finally jumps into action. He distracts the leader long enough for Kirito to recover, though he receives a grievous injury. Kirito enters into a rage and takes out the goblin leader, scaring off the rest. He unties Selka, but when she sees Yujiro's state, she isn't sure if her sacred arts can save him. Instead, Kirito decides to transfer his own life energy to save Yujiro. Almost passing out, he hears a voice telling him to come save her, and Kirito gets a strange feeling that they've met before. He asks Yujiro about it the next day. After the battle, Kirito's skills are high enough to swing the blue rose sword. Yujiro wants nothing more than to save Alice and asks him to train him. After some time, their sword skills are high enough to fall the tree as Yujiro lands the final blow. Since Yujiro has successfully completed his calling, he gets the chance to choose a new one. He vows to become a swordsman like Kirito and travel to the capital to save Alice. After saying goodbye to Selka, the two leave town for the first time in their lives. In the real world, following the attack on Kazuto's life, Asuna and his family are told that he may have permanent brain damage and is in a coma. Kikuoka proposes that the only way they could treat him is in a special facility, though his sister and Asuna are unable to locate him afterwards. They discuss the situation with all their friends and conclude that they must be using the new soul translator tech. Tracking his heart monitor, Asuna gets a ride from Klein to the last location, but it's a dead end. There's a helipad, and now that he's out of range, he could be anywhere. Their best bet is looking into Wrath. Apparently, Rinko Kojiro, Kayaba's assistant, helped develop the technology and might know where Wrath is holding Kazuto. After receiving an email, she decides it's time to pay a visit to their secret base in the middle of the ocean, bringing her assistant with her. Kikuoka is surprised to see her, as Rinko has been ignoring him up until now, but he's glad she came. Apparently, she's one of 3 people required to pull the project off. Having met the second, Takeru, the lead developer, Kikuoka says the 3rd member isn't available at the moment. Asuna then reveals her identity, removing her disguise as Rinko's assistant, and demands to see Kazuto. Since none of the other victims survived the toxic injections, Kikuoka assures her that using the STL is the only way to treat Kazuto's brain damage. They already know that the soul transfer tech can contain souls in what they call fluctlights. But to what end? Well, the real goal of the project is to create a bottom-up AI. Copying adults always leads to instability and collapse. They used the souls of babies, so the AI would grow up and learn. Using the seed, they created the Underworld to simulate an entire civilization, using the newborn fluctlights as archetypes, raised by 4 Wrath employees. After they accelerated time in the simulation, society began to form, followed by a governing body who created the Taboo Index, which is followed religiously by the populace, so much so that they are incapable of going against it. That's when they introduced Kirito to the world. Having him grow up with artificial fluctlights caused one, Alice, to break the Taboo Index. They needed someone with years of experience living in VR worlds, so naturally they decided to use Kirito to investigate how these laws came about and why it's nearly impossible for the artificial fluctlights to break them. Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh spend the next 2 years in the Underworld honing their sword skills. They successfully enroll in the Sword Mastery Academy, an integral part of becoming an Integrity Knight. Once they achieve that status, it allows them entry into the Central Cathedral and a chance to save Alice. In the Underworld, there are only 3 stats: Life, Object Control Authority, and System Control Authority. They work like in most other games. But there's a twist. The strength of one's mental image and the confidence in their abilities grants power beyond mere numbers. A few days later, Kirito spars with his mentor, Lina. She calls him out on holding back the true potential of his sword style. She chose to train him because she also uses an unconventional style. Over the past few years, her confidence in herself has grown. As the 2nd sword seed, she's never been able to beat the 1st sword seed, Levantaine, but she may have what it takes, now that she doesn't regard her own style as inferior. He promises to show her the true nature of his sword style as a graduation present the next day. Yu-Gi-Oh and Kirito visit an artisan they contracted to craft a sword cut from the tip of the Gigaseater's trunk, where most of its energy was concentrated. The smith can barely lift the sword, let alone wield it, so he offers it free of charge if Kirito can. Not only can he unsheath it, he even takes a swing. Impressed, the smith honors his word. Despite the rules against practicing on a day of rest, Kirito decides to try out more advanced sword skills he hasn't been able to use thus far. During a 5-strike combo, he's thrown off balance and flings mud onto the uniform of the 1st sword seed. Levantaine looks the other way regarding practicing on a day of rest, but not for soiling his uniform. He challenges Kirito to a duel using real swords. Requiring consent from both parties, Levantaine proposes a 1st strike match, as opposed to stopping short, whereby the swordsman doesn't follow through. Despite his master's warnings, Kirito accepts the terms, as he's the one being punished. Lina informs him of the Levantaine family motto. They believe that drawing the blood of their enemy allows them to absorb their strength. This isn't his first battle fought with real swords. Kirito sees this in action when they begin their duel. It becomes clear that his power doesn't come from his stats alone. Levantaine draws on the power he believes courses through his family's veins, enveloping him in illusory flames, allowing him to use sword skills. He immediately lunges toward Kirito, who has a few tricks of his own, blocking the strike and locking blades. Kirito refuses to lose, like always, and uses the power of friendship and teenage angst to increase his own, using Levantein's technique against him. His sword glows, infused with golden light. His resolve causes the blade to grow and turn blue with the power of the demon tree behind him. He attacks the first seed. Their duel is stopped short before either opponent causes serious damage. Kirito goes to check on the flowers he's been growing as a gift for his master, running into the two nobles who've hounded him and Yu-Gi-Oh since they started at the academy. He finds his planter ravaged and begins to break down until he hears the same mysterious voice from the cave. He learns that simply knowing system commands isn't the only way to change the world around him. Using his imagination and tapping into the life force of the flowers, he's able to resurrect them, discovering that the technique used in battle isn't reserved for destruction. Kirito's master realizes that believing her unique style was inferior was the reason she could never beat Levantain. But after watching her page's duel, she's confident she can beat the first seed, regardless of technique. During the final examination, she finally wins against the first seed, snapping his practice sword in half. She graduates as the top swordsman in her year. Yu-Gi-Oh and Kirito are promoted, now having their own pages to train. They're not the only ones. The nobles that have been bullying them have been promoted too. Kirito explains how to use one's imagination or will to effectively alter themselves or parts of the world. While attempting to unlock this ability, the two nobles, now first and second seed, focus their attention on Yu-Gi-Oh after witnessing Kirito give his master the flowers they destroyed. Umber, the second seed, antagonizes Yu-Gi-Oh. He loses to Yu-Gi-Oh in a duel, despite Rios ending it short and calling it a draw. A few days later, Yu-Gi-Oh wonders why they haven't retaliated. Kirito reasons they would be breaking the rules if they attacked fellow students, though he worries they may be looking for a loophole in the taboo index. The next day, they have a picnic with their pages, learning that there are ranks within the noble class as well. The lower-ranking ones are aristocrats in name only. Their pages relay the terrible treatment of their friend, a fellow page, following Yu-Gi-Oh's duel with Umber. Kirito explains that even if something doesn't go against the taboo index, it doesn't make it right. There are things that no one should ever subject a fellow human to, regardless of loopholes in the law. Later, the two confront the nobles about the treatment of their pages, but get nowhere, as the nobles play dumb and claim that they aren't technically breaking the rules. Afterwards, Kirito expresses his suspicions that the matter isn't over. They must be planning something. Yu-Gi-Oh's page, Tize, confesses that she is terrified at the possibility of marrying a noble who abuses their position of power. Soon after, Yu-Gi-Oh and Kirito's pages are late for the first time. Fearing the worst, Kirito slips out the window to investigate when Umber's page, Franika, knocks on the door. Apparently, after refusing to go along with his abusive and perverse orders, the two pages went to confront the sadistic nobleman. Yu-Gi-Oh races to their room to find both his and Kirito's pages tied up on the not-so-nobleman's bed. They claim that it's within their right to punish them however they deem fit. Yu-Gi-Oh is stopped in his tracks after being given an order, unable to move. His right eye starts flickering red, sending a sharp pain throughout his whole body, just like the day he tried to stop the Integrity Knight from taking Alice. Yu-Gi-Oh refuses to allow such scum to violate the innocent. His right eye bursts, breaking the seal, and he severs Umber's arm. Rios uses this as an excuse to kill Yu-Gi-Oh now that he's broken the taboo index. Suddenly, Kirito bursts through the window, saving Yu-Gi-Oh. Quickly ascertaining the situation, Kirito takes up arms against Rios. The two clash. Despite Rios' strength, he just can't keep his hands to himself, and without them, retaining blood becomes quite difficult. Rios writhes on the floor like a madman, his body glitching as if the system can't handle what's transpired. Even though they saved their pages, their crimes can't be unwritten. A mysterious face appears, citing the violation, as it did when Alice crossed into the dark territory. The next morning, an instructor heals Yu-Gi-Oh's eye before escorting them to the Integrity Knight waiting to whisk them away to their execution. The boys are shocked as the knight introduces herself as none other than Alice. She strikes Yujiro when he approaches, not recognizing her childhood friend. Their pages come to see them off, returning their swords and thanking them one last time as they're flown to the central cathedral chained to a dragon. At the facility, Asuna runs into a robot after visiting Kazuto. It turns out that they're trying to create a physical vessel to hold a fluctlight, making it easier for the AI to pilot and look more human. Back in the Underworld, Yujiro and Kirito discuss Alice's new condition and whether the voice in the cave was really Alice. They figure out that since they can still inspect the durability of items, and since their chains have the same object authority, theoretically, they should be able to break each other's. Hypothesis confirmed. It's time for a jailbreak. They find themselves outside on a garden terrace filled with roses. Now that they know Integrity Knights don't retain their memories, their goal changes. They have to rescue Alice and find a way to return her memories. Just when they think they're in the clear, they run into an Integrity Knight. Apparently, he's been waiting for them. It turns out he's Alice's disciple. Their chains won't help them now. The knight reveals his divine weapon, playing his hand too early. The two escapees devise a plan, but it's no use. Something's off. Yujiro recognizes the knight's name. As soon as they remind him of his past, an object protrudes from his forehead, most likely whatever's messing with his memories. But before they can learn anything more, another Integrity Knight fires an arrow into Kirito's foot. The two prisoners decide to book it. Kirito hears a voice directing them to a door that appears out of nowhere. A giant library lies on the other side, the door disappearing behind them. A woman greets them, introducing herself as Cardinal. Getting Kirito alone, she explains that she knows about the outside world and the truth behind the Axiom Church. He comes to realize she's an incarnation of the cardinal system that he's already familiar with. She explains that the church's founder is a descendant of the one Wrath employee with more devious intentions than the other three. Queen Ella discovered the underlying system that formed the basis for the sacred arts. With this knowledge, she began to increase her system control authority until she had enough power and followers to start the Axiom Church. By creating the Taboo Index, she guaranteed no one could surpass her control authority. Nearing the end of her life, Queen Ella finally accessed the complete list of system commands, effectively making herself immortal. The cardinal system was a threat to her power. Trying to gain the same authority level, she accidentally fused her fluctlight with the system itself. After a time, Queen Ella realized that her fluctlight memory capacity had reached its limit. She needed to devise a plan to overcome such limitations. She summoned a child, attempting to override her memories and supplant her own. Turns out it was her biggest mistake. She didn't account for potentially creating another godlike entity. The cardinal system contains a sub-process that acts as error correction. When Queen Ella tried taking control of the girl's fluctlight, the sub-process became contained within the woman calling herself Cardinal. After escaping to the Great Library, Queen Ella began to use the synthesis ritual to create Integrity Knights, while Cardinal sent out spies to gain allies of her own for the past 200 years. Despite this tyrannical rule over the Underworld, Wrath never stepped in. Instead, they're using it as a test. The Dark Territories are set to invade the human realm, harboring fluctlights of their own. Cardinal deemed it necessary to eliminate Queen Ella, the administrator, along with the Dark Territories, and the human ones. Despite that, she promises to save about 10 fluctlights. Kirito agrees to help her, but he refuses to delete the entire world. He'll find a way to save as many people as possible. Cardinal explains that the prism protruding from the Integrity Knight is the key to saving Alice. They just need to secure the memories the administrator has locked away. Before they set off, she gives them 2 daggers, allowing her to cast any sacred art on whoever's flesh they pierce. They already have weapons that rival the Integrity Knights, though they still need the ability to perform perfect weapon arts by unlocking the memories and power infused into the weapon itself. With that, they set off to reach the top of the cathedral to take down the administrator and rescue Alice from her clutches. Thank you for sticking until the end. Subscribe for more videos like this.